This happened last summer. I've lived in Sturgeon all my life, 45 years under the same sun and the same sky. I thought I understood every corner of my town. I thought I knew every face, every story. But things started to change, and I don't think I can say I completely understand what happened at IT was a normal evening. My patrol car rolled down Main Street, the streetlights casting a soft glow over the cracked pavement. Locals usually sat on porches, waving as I passed. But that night, the streets were empty, and the porch lights flickered like they were struggling against the dark. I felt a chill, maybe a sense of danger, but I didn't think much of it. It was just another quiet night, right? Then I got a noise complaint near the edge of town. I turned the siren off as I rolled into the driveway. I knocked on the door. A woman answered, her face unfamiliar and drawn. I thought I felt a chill in the air again. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice flat. I asked about the noise, and they invited me in. That's when I noticed the pictures on the walls. They didn't feel right, photos of gatherings I hadn't seen, faces I didn't recognize. I thought something was off, but maybe it was just me. I wasn't sure. Over the next few weeks, more new families trickled into town. I saw them in the shops, in the diner. Their laughter rang out, but it didn't sound like the laughter I was used to. It felt different, like it was drowning out something beneath. I felt an unsettling knot in my stomach. Maybe it was just me being resistant to change, but I also had a nagging feeling that it was more than that I began to notice fewer pets around. You know how the neighborhood dogs bark at nothing at all? It felt like they stopped barking. The locals seemed to withdraw into themselves. My friends wouldn't make eye contact, would turn their heads when I approached. I thought, is this normal? Maybe it was just me overthinking. One night, while patrolling again, I saw shadows gathering at the park. There were many new faces, too many to count. They all looked the same, almost as if they belonged to one big family. I felt cold as I watched, trying to identify them, but I couldn't. I forced myself to turn away, to return to my car. My heart pounded as the feeling of being watched weighed on me. Then one of the newcomers spoke, just a whisper. "We know you, Sheriff." I turned, and there was only darkness. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks, but I could swear I felt their eyes on me. As summer wore on, I felt more uncertainties. Was it me? The town? Or was there something deeper? I think about those nights often, about the faces I never knew, and the quiet that felt alive. What was really happening in my town? The next day, I decided to investigate further. I had to know what was happening with the town. I started with Clara, my neighbor. She had lived next door for years, and I trusted her view of things. I knocked on her door, and when she answered, her face turned pale. "Sheriff," she said, glancing over her shoulder as if someone might be listening, "I don't know what to tell you." Her voice was shaky, and that knot in my stomach tightened even more. I pushed for answers. "Clara, have you noticed the changes? The new people?" She nodded slowly, her eyes darting around. They came in so fast. It's like they just appeared. I don't know how else to say it. "What do you mean?" I pressed, trying to keep my voice steady. Clara took a deep breath. "They ask questions. About us. About the town. I think they want to take over." She might have sounded paranoid, but so did I. I couldn't shake the truth that something was indeed creeping into our small community. After the awkward conversation, I drove to the diner. I thought maybe Sean, the owner, could shed some light on what was going on. As soon as I walked in, I sensed a shift. People grew quiet. I noticed the newcomers clustered in the corner, laughing softly amongst themselves. I waved to Sean, but he avoided my gaze. "Sean," I called out, moving towards the counter. He turned to me, his hands trembling as he wiped them on his apron. "Sheriff, maybe you should. I need to know what is happening, Sean." "I can't just ignore it," I interrupted. He shook his head, but in a hushed voice, he said, "They're not what they seem." "What do you mean?" I retorted, pushing for clarity. Before he could respond, the door swung open. A tall man walked in, one of the newcomers. He had a confident stride and a smile that felt unsettling. He approached me. "Sheriff, how nice to see you out and about." His voice was smooth, but I felt a cold sweat start at the back of my neck. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice tough. "Just a friendly chat. We're all part of the same community now." He leaned closer, his smile widening. "You ought to embrace the changes." I stepped back. My instincts screamed at me to escape, but I couldn't. "Not yet. You're not from around here." "Oh, but we are now," he said. I noticed the others behind him shifting, their eyes locked onto me. That feeling returned, of being watched, of being trapped. Leave us alone. It came out more like a plea than a command. Why would we do that? He asked, tilting his head slightly. We're just getting started. I turned, making my way back to the door. As I stepped outside, the air felt thicker, as if it were pressing down. I needed a plan. I needed answers. That's when I saw a flicker of movement by the park's entrance. There, in the shadows. I squinted, and I felt my heart race. Something, or someone, was watching me again. I took a cautious step towards the park, my eyes still fixed on the shadows. The flicker of movement was almost gone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to know what was there. Was it one of the newcomers? Or just a trick of the light? Sheriff, a voice called from behind me, jolting me from my thoughts. It was Deputy Marks, my right-hand man. He was rushing toward me, his face flushed. I've been looking for you. Did you see that? I asked, pointing towards the park. See what? He looked confused. I didn't catch anything. Just you looking a bit off. Something's happening in this town, Marks. The newcomers, they're not what they appear to be. Marks frowned, his brow furrowing. What do you mean? They're asking questions. Clara said they act like they want to take over. I searched his face for understanding. Before he could respond, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a message from Clara. Meet me at the old library. I found something. Urgency gripped me. I have to go, I said, my voice tense. Clara thinks she has information. Wait, Sheriff. Let me come with you. He tried to keep pace with me as I walked away from the diner. No, it's better if I go alone. If they're watching, I took a deep breath, remembering the tall man's gaze. I can't risk drawing more attention. As I made my way to the library, the streets felt suffocating. I spotted more of the newcomers out and about. They were too friendly, too perfect in a way that set my nerves on edge. Their eyes seemed to follow me as I passed. I quickened my pace, my mind racing with the possibilities of what could go wrong. Reaching the library, I pushed the door open with a creak that echoed in the quiet room. Dust particles floated in the beams of light. Clara appeared almost from nowhere, the shadows hiding her in the back. Clara, I whispered urgently. She waved me closer. I found something, she began, her voice trembling. She pulled out a stack of old papers from her bag and spread them across a nearby table. These are from Town Hall. They have plans for the park for the community. I scanned the papers, my heart racing as the implications began to sink in. What plans? Look. She pointed at a blueprint. Marked in thick, red lines were designated areas for development, and my stomach dropped. They want to demolish part of the park. They're planning something big, Sheriff. Before I could respond, the door swung open. I turned abruptly, my heart sinking. It was the tall man again, his smile as unnerving as ever. What a lovely little gathering, he said, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Leave us alone, I snapped, stepping in front of Clara protectively. Oh, but I can't do that, he said, stepping further inside. We have so much more to discuss. The atmosphere thickened with tension. I felt cornered. Something had to give. That's when I noticed it. Behind him, lurking in the doorway, were several of the others. They looked ready, as if they'd been waiting for this moment. I held my breath. We were trapped. I glanced between the tall man and the group behind him. Panic surged through me. I could almost hear the clock ticking, each second stretching out into eternity. What do you want? I demanded, my voice steadier than I felt. The tall man stepped closer, the light reflecting off his sharp features. We want what's best for this town, he said, his tone smooth and disarming. And we think you need to come to terms with the changes. Changes? I echoed. You mean tearing down the park? For what? Some profit scheme. A smirk twisted his lips. You see, Sheriff, it's much more than that. The park is a relic from a time that no longer serves the needs of this community. Clara's hand gripped my arm tightly. I could feel her fear radiating. I wanted to reassure her, but I had to stay focused. This is our home, I said, trying to keep my voice calm and authoritative. You can't just come in here and take it away. Quite the opposite, the tall man replied. We're bringing this town into a new era. We plan to expand, to make it a shining beacon. You and your tiny grip on the past are the only thing standing in our way. I exchanged a glance with Clara. I knew I had to buy us some time. You don't have to do this, I said slowly. Let us talk this through. He chuckled, a low sound that sent a chill down my spine. Ah, Sheriff. Talking is overrated. The world moves quickly, and so must we. He gestured to his group. They stepped forward, each of them looking ready to move in. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash from outside. It was followed by shouting. My instinct flared. I had to see what was happening. "Stay here," I whispered to Clara, but I knew that wasn't really an option. She wouldn't let me go on my own. Before I could think it through, I dashed past the tall man toward the door. He lunged to grab my arm, but I spun away just in time. The door slammed open, and the chaotic scene outside greeted us. The newcomers were rounded up in a huddle, but they weren't just talking. They were forcefully confronting someone I couldn't see. A chill raced down my spine when I recognized one of the figures. It was Mark's. "Get back!" I shouted, stepping toward the fray. Clara followed closely behind me. Marks was trying to fend them off, his posture protective. "Sheriff, help!" he yelled, but his voice was drowned in the commotion. I pressed through the crowd, adrenaline pumping through my veins. Just as I reached him, a figure stepped forward from the group, a glint of metal flashing in the sun. My stomach dropped. "Stand down, or things will get ugly," I warned, raising my hands to show I meant no harm. The tall man appeared behind me, his presence suffocating. "This is the future, Sheriff. Accept it, or watch your friend get hurt." I felt time freeze as Marks glanced at me, confusion mingled with fear in his eyes. I had to make a decision fast. Then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, the world was still. The shouting faded to a hollow echo, and I felt a strange heaviness in my limbs. Panic surged again, and I pushed myself up from the ground, shaking my head to clear the fog. It took a moment for my eyes to focus, but when they did, my heart sank. Clara knelt beside me, worry etched across her face. "Sheriff, are you all right?" "I think so," I replied, though it didn't sound convincing, even to me. My head throbbed, and the heat of the sun bore down as if it were mocking my confusion. I looked around, trying to assess what I had missed. The crowd that had once been engaged in chaos was now scattered and still. The tall man was nowhere to be seen, but the air crackled with tension. I turned to find Marks, but he was also gone. My gut twisted with dread. "Where's Marks?" I asked, my voice rising. Clara pointed toward the park's entrance. They took him. They pulled him away when you fell. We have to go after them." The urgency in her voice shook me. Without another thought, I grabbed Clara's hand, and we rushed toward the park entrance. Each step felt heavier than the last, but I pushed through. I needed to find Marks. As we reached the entrance, I spotted them, 3 figures in dark clothes leading Marks away, their backs turned to us. I squinted to see their faces better, but they were turned away, blending into the trees. I signaled to Clara to stay low as we crept closer. Then, just as we rounded a thick oak, we heard a voice carry through the air. "You don't get to walk away from this." It was Marks, shouting defiantly, his words laced with desperation. "Shut up, old man. You think anyone cares? You're just a nuisance." One of the figures spat back, their tone dripping with venom. I felt anger flare, but I kept it contained. I needed a plan. I couldn't charge in blindly. I had to be smart about this. "We need to get the law involved," I whispered to Clara, glancing back toward the sheriff's station. "Call for backup." Her eyes widened. "Are you sure? What if they hurt him?" My mind raced. "If we don't act, they may get away with this. We have to keep them talking while we figure something out." Just then, one of the figures turned slightly, and I caught a glimpse of a logo on the back of his jacket, a symbol I had seen before but couldn't quite place. Suddenly, it all clicked together. They're part of that development group. I realized, my heart pounding in recognition. Marks was struggling in their grasp, his voice strained. "You can't scare me. I know what you're doing, and I'll stop you." "Are you sure about that, Sheriff?" The tall man stepped out from the shadows behind Marks, a sinister smile creeping onto his face. "Because it seems you're outnumbered." I took a deep breath, my heart racing. This was only escalating, and now they knew my intent. I needed to act quickly. "Tell me where you're taking him," I shouted, my voice rising. "Or I swear I'll then." Before I could finish my threat, a shout erupted from the trees behind me. My breath caught. "Sheriff, help." It was a voice I didn't recognize, but it was too late to turn back now. I whipped around, my instincts screaming that I had to respond. What the eye spotted a figure moving in the shadows, struggling against something unseen. I didn't recognize him, but his frantic cries cut through my confusion. The figures holding Marks paused, uncertainty flashing across their faces. This was my chance. "Clara, stay here." I instructed before darting towards the sound. I knew better than to split up, but something inside me pushed forward. I had to see who else was in danger. I weaved through the trees, my heart racing with adrenaline. The cries became clearer as I got closer. It felt as if everything around me had dimmed, all except the urgency of that voice. Help me. They're going to. I rounded a bush and stopped dead in my tracks. The scene was horrifying. A young man was being restrained by two more men in dark clothing, their backs to me, their grip tight on his arms. I recognized him now. It was Ben, one of the local kids known for his troublemaking. Why would they be after him? Let him go, I shouted, and as soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. The figures spun around. Their eyes held a fierce intensity, and I could see they were ready for a fight. Sheriff, help! Ben shouted again, panic swelling in his voice. That I couldn't leave marks behind, but I couldn't let them hurt Ben either. I glanced back, weighing my options. Clara had gone silent, and I knew I had to act fast. I reached for my radio, but it was gone. Panic flooded my senses. I must be lost it when I fell. I was on my own. I stepped closer, hands raised. You can walk away from this. Let the kid go, and I'll forget you even took marks. The lead figure laughed, low and menacing. You really think you have any power here? You're in over your head, Sheriff. In that moment, the wind shifted, and a chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Let us just say, you're not the only player in this game, he replied, his smirk widening. And your friend is a liability. Better get used to losing. My mind spun as I tried to process his words. Something was happening beneath the surface of our town, something bigger than I had imagined. Before I could respond, someone else emerged from the trees, breathless and frantic. Sheriff, they're coming. It was female. I couldn't place her, but her urgent tone brought terrible clarity that I needed to maintain control, but the impossible situation felt like it was unraveling. As the figures tightened their grip on Ben, I saw their eyes dart to something behind me, and time seemed to slow. Before I could turn, the ground shook underfoot, and an earth-shattering crash echoed through the park. The dark figures hesitated, confusion stamped across their faces. Then everything was chaos. I stumbled back as debris rained down from the trees, a branch splintering above my head. The figures holding Ben finally released him, fear evident in their eyes. I darted forward, grabbing Ben by the arm, ready to pull him to safety. Run, I shouted. But he stayed still, looking back at the darkness behind me. Sheriff, wait. We can't just. I jerked him forward, my heart pounding. We don't have time. Just then, a low growl echoed through the air, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The man in the lead took a step back, fear shifting into fury. You're making a mistake, Sheriff. He turned, signaling his crew. Get out of here. We'll handle this later. They slipped into the shadows, eyes darting as they disappeared into the trees. I stood for a moment, breathless, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Are you okay? I asked Ben, checking for any injuries. I think so, he replied, trembling slightly. What was that noise? And who were those guys? I didn't have an answer. I don't know. We need to find Clara and get back to town. Something's very wrong here. As we turned to make our way back, I caught sight of the girl who had called out to me. She stepped from behind a tree, her face pale. They're coming for everyone, Sheriff. You need to believe that. Who are they? I pressed, feeling the weight of uncertainty settle heavily in my gut. They're not just here for you. They want control over everything. She looked back over her shoulder. We need to warn people. Let us go, I said, urgency building. But as we moved deeper into the park, I heard shouts in the distance, the unmistakable sounds of panic and chaos. Something is happening in town, I muttered, my instincts guiding me forward. Sheriff, wait, Ben said, grabbing my arm. You can't go back without backup. I shook my head, determination pushing past my fear. I'm not leaving anyone behind. I couldn't ignore the urgency of the situation. As much as I wanted to call for help, there was still no radio. I could already see the flickering lights of the town ahead. But then I heard it again, the growl, closer this time. A shiver ran down my spine, and I glanced behind to see shadows shifting among the trees. Run, I yelled, and together we sprinted towards the chaos. The growing sense of dread clawing at me like something alive. We burst into the clearing that led to the town square, but my heart sank. People were running, screams blending into the night air. The scene was chaotic, a reflection of the fear that gripped me. "Get back!" I shouted, trying to push through the crowd. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A figure stood in the center of the square, tall and imposing. The darkness seemed to coil around him as he raised a hand, a gesture that sent the crowd into an even greater frenzy. That's when I saw it. An object, glinting ominously in the light of the street lamps. It was large, twisted steel, a warning or a weapon. Now I understood. The game was changing, and we were about to find out just how far those involved were willing to go. The chaos in the square pulled me in all directions. I could see the familiar faces of my neighbors, fear etched deep into their features as they stumbled past me. It felt surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I pushed through the crowd, trying to reach the figure standing at the center, but the sheer panic made it almost impossible. "Ben!" I called out, my voice barely cutting through the clamor. He was behind me, eyes wide, frozen in shock. "Get to the van. We need to get people out of here." "But Sheriff, no arguing." "Go." I turned back, focusing on the imposing figure again. He seemed to draw the darkness around him, his presence amplifying the confusion. I pushed closer, breathing hard. I needed to find out who he was and what he wanted. My badge felt heavy against my chest, a reminder of the duty I had to protect my town. But as I approached, the tension was palpable. The figure's eyes pierced through the frenzy like daggers, locking onto me. "Sheriff," he called out, his voice smooth yet chilling. "You're too late. What do you want?" I managed to shout, grounding myself against the sea of terrified faces. He chuckled softly, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Your little town is about to change, and you can't stop it. You should have walked away while you had the chance." Suddenly, he raised that shiny object, a twisted piece of metal, and the crowd gasped. Some people fell to their knees, covering their heads. Others screamed and pushed back, desperate to get away. Panic surged, and I felt it roar through me. Then, without warning, he hurled the object into the air. Time seemed to slow as it spiraled through the night, and I instinctively reached for my sidearm. The crowd erupted into chaos, people frantically running in all directions. The metal thing clanged loudly against the ground, sending up sparks. But I didn't wait to see what it was. I dashed towards the figure, my heart racing with adrenaline. If he had control over this chaos, I needed to confront him. Just as I got close, he raised his hand again, and that growl echoed from the darkness surrounding the square. It was closer than before, a sound that sent chills down my spine. I glanced back at Ben, who was still trying to disentangle himself from the crowd, eyes darting in fear. "Stay close," I shouted, but fear washed over me as I realized he was unable to get through the throng. I had to choose between facing this man and getting Ben to safety. In that moment of decision, a shadow shifted behind the attacker, and I caught a glimpse of something or someone moving silently through the chaos. My instincts screamed danger. Then everything went dark. The lights flickered, then went out, plunging the square into a void. People were still screaming, but now disoriented, freaked out by the sudden lack of illumination. I stumbled, feeling my way through the darkness as I sought a way to reach Ben, to figure out what was happening. The growl came again, deeper and resonating with threat. I felt trapped in a nightmare, caught between the fear of the shadows and my need to protect those I loved. Would I be able to find Ben before whatever lurked in the darkness found him first? Chapter 2. Shadows in the dark. The darkness pressed in around me, thick and suffocating. I was blind, and the shrieks and cries surrounded me like a volatile storm. I stumbled forward, reaching out with my hands, hoping to find someone, anyone. "Ben!" I shouted again, panic flooding my veins. "Where are you?" No answer, just the growing cacophony of terror echoing through the square. In the chaos, I heard the growl once more, deep and feral. It felt unnatural, as if it belonged to something that shouldn't exist. My heart raced, pounding against my ribs. I was losing precious moments that I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I forced my mind to focus. I needed a plan. My hand brushed against something cold and metallic, a street sign. I twisted it, hoping to use it to navigate through the chaos. The sound of the crowd surged again, and I pushed forward, listening intently for any sign of Ben. Then, like a light flickering on, I heard a voice through the din. It was faint but unmistakable. "Sheriff!" Ben's voice was raw with fear. I turned toward it, straining against the dark. Ben, stay where you are. I moved in the direction of his voice, dodging people who were panicking, some still kneeling on the ground. I could feel their fear, a palpable thing that pushed against me like a wave. I can't find my way, he yelled, panic breaking through. I'm coming, I shouted back, pushing through the crowd. Just as I reached what felt like a small clearing, the growl erupted closer than before, a guttural sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Something was approaching, lurking somewhere in the shadows, and it wasn't going to stop for anything. Suddenly, a figure burst past me, almost knocking me off my feet. I turned, ready to confront whoever it was. But instead, I caught a fleeting glimpse of a dark shape darting into the blackness. My gut twisted. What was out there? Stop! I shouted, fearing the worst. But it was too late. The figure was gone, swallowed by the darkness. I pressed on, hoping to find Ben before whatever that creature was could get to him first. Finally, I spotted Ben ahead, crouched near the van, fumbling with the door. Help! He cried, the sound cutting through the terror. I rushed to him, grabbing his arm and pulling him close, relief flooding through me. We need to get out of here. Just then, the lights flickered back to life, revealing the square in chaos. But something was different. Where the figure had once stood, there was now only a spiraling cloud of shadow, swirling like smoke, retreating into an alley. Did you see that? I questioned, bewildered. What was that? I don't know, Ben stammered, eyes wide. It felt like something was watching us. A chill raced down my spine. Just as I was about to respond, the growl came again, louder this time. It sounded almost like it was getting closer. That's when I noticed it. Beneath the flickering streetlights, shadows were shifting too deliberately, almost like they were alive. My breath hitched. Get to the van, I ordered, pulling him along, my eyes scanning for any danger lurking in the corners. The reality was hitting me hard. We weren't just dealing with a frightened crowd anymore. Something sinister was at play, and I was determined to uncover it. But as we reached the van, I heard the haunting laugh of the figure from before. Run while you can, he taunted. You're only delaying the inevitable. Before I could react, another growl echoed through the square, feral and hungry. I threw a glance back at those dark shapes. They weren't retreating, they were gathering. Just then, I saw something glinting in the shadows. A pair of eyes, glimmering with malevolence, locking onto me. Everything inside me screamed to flee, but I had to stand my ground. I had to protect my town. And the sickening realization hit me this was only just the beginning. When I finally emerged from the murky fog of my own confusion, the town was suffused with an eerie stillness. I blinked, trying to shake off the sensation of overwhelming dread that clung to me like a second skin. As my senses gradually tuned back into the world around me, I noticed the square was now eerily empty, save for the flickering streetlights that had returned to life, casting unsettling shadows across the cracked pavement. Sheriff? Ben's voice broke the silence, his face a mixture of confusion and fear. What happened? Where did everyone go? I took a moment to regain my composure. I don't know. It's like they just vanished. The absence of chaos should have felt reassuring, but instead, my heart raced with the unsettling thought that it was just the calm before another storm, that we moved cautiously through the square, stepping over scattered debris and abandoned belongings that painted a haunting picture of panic. The silence was almost deafening. I scanned my surroundings, hoping to spot Clara or Marks, but there was no one in sight. We need to find them, I said absently, more to myself than to Ben, who stood frozen beside me. They can't be far. As we walked, the unease settled deeper. I could almost feel invisible eyes watching us from the shadows, waiting for something to happen. I turned to Ben, determined to distract myself from my own spiraling thoughts. Can you remember what happened right before the lights went out? He shook his head, gripping the side of the van with white knuckles. It was chaos. People were running, screaming. I didn't even know where to go. Exactly, I said, forcing a calmness I didn't feel. And then that growl. The way he looked at me, wide-eyed and frightened, filled me with a mix of protectiveness and foreboding. We got to I started, but then I caught a movement behind us. Out of instinct, I spun around, heart racing again. The darkness beyond the streetlights coiled and twisted, as though weaving form from nothingness. Sheriff, Ben cried, his voice a shrill whisper. What is happening? I don't know, I replied tersely, eyes fixed on the roiling shadows, fighting the urge to flee. My instinct screamed at me to leave, to find safety. But I couldn't abandon Ben or the memory of the chaos left behind. The shadows surged forward like a tide, and I took a step back, adrenaline flooding my system. Get in the van, I shouted. Before I could react, the shadows twisted and coalesced, taking on the indistinct figures of the newcomers, the ones who had been part of the town's eerie transformation. Their faces were obscured, replicating the same sinister smile I had seen before. Get back, I shouted, trying to sound authoritative. But I knew this confrontation was far beyond my power, my badge, a flimsy shield against whatever darkness had descended upon Sturgeon. Oh, Sheriff, the tall man said, stepping forward until he was enveloped in the light of the street lamp. The amusement in his eyes only deepened my dread. You should have taken our advice. It's too late to turn back now. What do you want? I demanded, injecting strength into my voice. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Simply to fulfill what has been set in motion. Our plans for Sturgeon 1T be halted by a single sheriff clinging to nostalgia. The change is inevitable. Change, I scoffed, my insides twisting as a sense of urgency pushed me toward action. You mean chaos and fear? No, Sheriff, he corrected, subtly gesturing to the shadows. This is simply the beginning of a new era. One where we can reshape reality for all. I could feel the weight of those words. They sent a shiver through me, intertwined with a primal instinct that whispered, something was fundamentally wrong. The implications of his words rolled through my mind like a dark wave. What were they capable of? With that thought, the shadows surged again, drawing closer. Now, if you would kindly step aside, the tall man gestured for his companions to advance. Ben, I said, my tone low and urgent. Get ready to run. Before I could strategize an exit, the growl erupted again, primal and angry. I recognized that sound from before, whatever it was closing in. Now, I yelled, shoving Ben toward the van while I drew my sidearm, feeling the terror grip my heart. As I spun around to confront the advancing shadows, I spotted a familiar flash of movement. Clara, or maybe it was a figment of my imagination, darting through the flickering lights. I needed to reach her, but the space between us narrowed under a weight that held us all back. Why don't you join us, Sheriff? The tall man taunted, his voice echoing across the darkening square. You'll find it's far more liberating than you think. A battle raged inside me. There was a heavy, unshakable inevitability to what was happening. Some pivotal shift was underway, yet I had to keep fighting. And then, just as I felt myself beginning to succumb to despair, I noticed an opening, a narrow alleyway that cut across the square. This way, I yelled, lunging for Ben, my resolve sharpening. With Ben trailing behind, I bolted for the alley, each step echoing in the silent chaos. The shouts of the newcomers grew distant as we risked the unknown, that weightless but pressing sense of fear urging us onward. I didn't dare look back. All I knew was that we had to escape. But as I stepped into the darkness of that alley, the flickering streetlights faded into a distant glow, leaving us enveloped in shadows. I turned back for one last glimpse of the square, the strange army of newcomers waiting in anticipation, and I couldn't shake the dread curling in my gut. Had we truly escaped yet? Or was there still something lurking in the dark, watching, planning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? I didn't have those answers. I just knew that this night was far from over.